Hello and welcome, everybody. It's such a pleasure to have you here today for the next Birds of the World webinar. Today, our Discovery Series webinar is going to explore how the lab is applying state-of-the-art machine learning to eBird observations and how we generate data products for conservation. So I am so thrilled that ecologists, ornithologists, students, and birders from 82 countries are with us today. So I want to say hello to our friends in Australia, Croatia, Colombia, Cambodia, Egypt, Guyana, Hong Kong, Singapore, Sweden, South Africa, and so many more countries, points in between. So thank you all for being with us today. It means a lot that you're joining us today to learn with us, to share your expertise and helping us, the world, advance bird conservation. We are hosting the webinar from Ithaca, New York, and I'd like to read a land statement that acknowledges the indigenous people as the original inhabitants of this area. So Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayokono, which is the Cayuga Nation. The Gayokono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which is an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and a contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of the Gayokono dispossession, and we honor the ongoing connection of the Gayokono people, past and present, to these lands and waters. So thank you. So I'm your host, Laura Kammermeyer, and joining me is Jessica Kane. Jessica Kane will be monitoring the chat and helping us behind the scenes to make everything go smoothly. So we have just a few tech-related announcements. Our session will be recorded and emailed to you next week. The recording will also be available in the news section of our website at birdsoftheworld.org. And if you would like closed captioning, it is available. You just click the CC at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom chat, in the Zoom, so the CC button. And if you have any questions for our speaker today, it would be best to put it in the Q&A. We do not monitor the chat for questions, but we do monitor the Q&A. So if you have anything for Tom, please let us know there. So Tom, if you'd like to put on your chat at this point. Welcome. Let me introduce.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me introduce you to Tom Auer, who's the geospatial data science lead at the lab. Tom leads the production efforts for eBird status and trends, and his team is behind those incredibly informative data geovisualizations that show how birds are moving across the earth in space and time. So Tom, would you do us the favor of telling us a little bit about yourself and what the team does at the lab?
Great, thanks, Laura. Yeah, my name's Tom Auer, and I've been at the lab for 7 years. I have a background in both biology and geography. Been a birder since a long time, middle school. So I have a dream job. I get to combine my love of birds and generating awesome maps and data products that get used about birds. So I'm part of a team of 8 or 9 folks that are within another team, the general eBird team, but we're the eBird status and trends team, and you can see a list of folks up here that are the main team members contributing to this effort. We're taking all that amazing eBird data, and today I'm going to talk about how we turn that into usable data products for science, and we call this the eBird Status and Trends Project. And so I'm excited to dive into that.
Excellent. Maybe it might be useful just to go over to the website real quick and just show us where these eBird Status and Trends products can be found online in case people want to check this out later. I suppose so, but
that's a great idea, and I think it's a great intro to the project and to the presentation. Science.ebird.org is where you'd land here. This kind of covers all of the things related to science and eBird. In the left here, you'll see a status and trends link. And if you go there, you hit our landing page. You can learn about all of the products. There's different explanatory articles about everything we generate. And then on the right, more details that you can get to. If you choose a species, say lark sparrow, which is almost U.S. continental species, you'll get this interactive map where you can zoom and pan and highlight and get detail information in the web browser about the species for all the different seasons. What you're looking at here is a map of relative abundance colored by the different seasons as an arrange map. We also have trends information. I'm going to talk more about this, but this is one of our core products, trends and relative abundance over time. Each of these circles is indicating the rate of change over the last 14 or 15 years for the species. Up in the top right, there's a downloads button. This is an important place. You can go and download static versions of any of these images, animations. You can also access the data. You do have to fill out a form agreeing to our terms of use, but it's all click through. You don't have to wait for anybody. And then you can download all of these data products, summaries, maps, everything you'd need to use this information and share it in the world. And our terms of use are very friendly for scientific use, educational use, and things like that. We also make these products available on Birds of the World as well, which is part of why we're here talking about it today. On some pages, you'll notice that that seasonal map that I showed is embedded in the distribution page of Birds of the World. Similarly, the animation is embedded in the movements and migration page, and we've got that for almost 1,000 species.
And will that be increasing over time?
Yep. As with the project as a whole, we're really hoping to increase the number of species that make it to Birds of the World every year. We do have a higher quality threshold that we set for products to make it to Birds of the World.
Good to know. All right, thanks. Well, we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Welcome, everyone. So as I said, I want to thank all the members of the team here, and then I'm just going to dive right in. I think everybody who's here today probably is pretty familiar with eBird. We've got an amazing global reach thanks to partners all across the globe. We're up over 1.3 billion bird observations now. And this map here shows the density of locations people have submitted eBird data from. And I think this is a good place to start in framing this notion of filling the gaps, because as you see, we don't have data from every point on Earth. So keep that in mind as we move forward. What we do have is an enormous amount of data, an unparalleled repository of information about birds, and we want to take advantage of that. So the goal really here of eBird is to collect data that are used to estimate the distribution, right? Traditional range maps you could think of, abundance, how many birds are there, and the trends in abundance of bird populations by collaborating with a global network of bird enthusiasts. I want to focus on that last word, enthusiasts, because that's kind of one of the things that really sets the stage for why we have to do what I'm about to explain what we're going to do. And that's because we're collecting all this information about birds through the lens of people. And people interpret the world in different ways. They observe the world in different ways. And I think a good analogy for this is to think about art, right? If you think about how Monet painted, there's a very diffuse quality to his paintings. And you can think of this as adding noise to an observation of something in the real world, right? Here you would struggle to identify these birds in his painting because of how little detail there is and how much noise there is. Similarly, you might take a Salvador Dali painting, and while there's a little more detail, there's what we would consider as scientists directional bias. This is not very realistic representation of a bird. But we can work with this as long as we know what these sorts of different variations are. And we've spent a lot of time thinking about the sorts of human variation that contribute to this understanding of birds, right? Because people are different, and everybody goes out and does something differently. They detect birds differently. They have different levels of identification skill. They have different patiences for counting. They do different things when they go out birding. They spend different amounts of time. They go to different places. So we want to capture this when we're also trying to capture that information about birds. So if we think about the kind of domain that we're working within here, let's look at the processes at scale that we want to capture. The y-axis is space, and the x-axis is time. We know we want to capture as much information about the birds, the ecological process. I've just put a couple examples up here, things, right, that I think we do fairly well. Migration, seeing where the birds are moving through time, what habitats they're in and associating with, what they're selecting. But within this are finer grained scales of bird information, bird behavior, right? There's what we call availability for detection. Just because a bird is in a habitat doesn't mean you're going to be able to see it. It's certainly easier if the bird is vocalizing or if it's out feeding in the open. And things like weather can have an impact on whether that bird is available to be detected or not. So then again, nested within all of this is what happens when we make an observation of this system, when we have a human observing. And at the whole observation level, you can think about a person in their house with their eBird app today being like, where should I go birding? How long do I have to go birding? And so those are the things like effort and site selection process that are part of the biases associated with people observing birds. And then nested within that overlaps that availability for detection process is the human detection process. What are the behaviors people have when they go out and they're observing birds? Are they detecting everything that's around? Are they able to identify everything that's around? Is weather interacting with that? And so we want to capture all of this. And the way that we do this as scientists is in analysis is to build a model, right? A lot of research and science builds models. You can think of weather systems, they build models. Physicists build models all the time. We're going to build a model. And the models that really work best for this work are called species distribution models. And I like this definition that I took from another person who works in the field, Jane Elith. And she says species distribution models are numerical tools that combine observations of species occurrence, right there we've got the birds, and abundance. I put the end in there because that's what we do. With environmental estimates. We also call them environmental features or environmental covariates to predict distributions across landscapes. So this is our model. This is what we're doing. We use machine learning, right, which is a form of artificial intelligence, so to speak, because it's very high performing. It can do way more computing than any human could do by writing a deterministic model. So as I walk through and talk about the different things that we're dealing with of those different processes, I'm going to guide us through with a model, right? So our goal of our model is to get our best estimate of truth. And I put truth in quote marks because we never know what truth is, but we want to estimate it as best we can because that's what's going to be most useful. So we're going to start with the information about birds, which, right, are being observed by people. And one of the common questions that came up from webinar participants ahead of time was, what do you do with the eBird data? How do you deal with things like, misidentifications or different aspects related to quality? And so that's kind of the first thing when the data hits our analysis workflow, when it hits our model, is that it's already been through a very rigorous data quality process. The eBird system has more than 1,800 volunteer reviewers. It has 5,000 human-defined filters, right? So if you submit a checklist in a place and time, there's a filter there that identifies observations that need to be verified. All checklists that get submitted are run through either one of these human-generated filters or is seen by an observer. And that 20% of checklists are actually reviewed by a human to evaluate their quality. So when the data is coming through to us in status and trends, it's already been through a rigorous quality process in eBird. And then we take another level of filtering to choose the best data that's eligible for analysis, that works really well in our system. eBird status and trends eligible data. And we're working with complete checklists, eBird checklists that have answered that, have you reported all species you've seen question. They're not traveling very far, they're less than 10 kilometers, and this will be more obvious later, but it really helps us associate bird observations with places on the ground. They're less than 6 hours. If you've been out over a long period of time, it's hard to understand what sort of birds and birder behavior are associated with the observations. Again, long checklists are more likely to travel long distances. We want those checklists that are traveling or stationary protocols, not incidental protocols. We really need people to make an effort at counting, not just submitting an X. Any effort at counting is better than no effort at counting, really, because it averages out over the population. And then we need all that effort info. We need the what time you started, how many people you were with, all that stuff. So we're filtering the data down to create a set that's eligible for analysis. All right, so let's go back to our model. We got our bird data, we're ready. The next thing we want to do, and this is really where we get into filling the gaps, is add ecological information. We call these environmental variables. They're based on a lot of remote sensing satellite data. This is an older visualization, but I think it's still a really relevant one. Looking at North America here for a week of Magnolia warbler, the tiny, tiny gray dots that you're seeing kind of scattered about urban areas in the background, those are places that somebody didn't see a Magnolia warbler. Whereas the green dots are places that somebody did see a Magnolia warbler. And this is readily apparent that we don't have information from every location. So we need to fill in the gaps. So we can transform this into a continuous surface displaying where you're most likely to see Magnolia warblers and how many of them are. So in this case, white is bright, more Magnolia warblers, darker orange is less, they're less frequent there. And so now we've taken, scattered data and filled in the gaps. And the way that we do this is by having information about the environment at all of those places in between the checklists. We call these environmental variables. They often come from satellites, often run by NASA, but not entirely. And they are imaging the Earth at least yearly, if not more often than that, and giving us information about things like roads, water cover, land use, right? Agriculture is important, hydrology, elevation and bathymetry, key variables for understanding where birds are, topography, the shape of the landscape, nighttime lights tells us about human impact, islands is important for endemism, and we're really adding some great information about coastlines, these important habitats for shorebirds, and things like vegetation index. These are available all over the Earth, and so when they go into our model can learn the relationship between where birds are and where these environmental variables are, that machine learning, and help us predict to all those surfaces. And so let me do a little dive-in example here with this shorebird willet. You can see on the left, this is an old estimate, but it's still relevant. Dark purple is high relative abundance. Lighter colors are lower relative abundance. We're going to zoom in on this part of Massachusetts up here. And this is a good example because it's a very heterogeneous set. There's a variety of habitats. And so these green pixels, these very fine scale green pixels, that's our information about tidal mudflats at a very fine resolution, 30-meter resolution. And then we can add on top of that, we can add our land cover information about wetlands. And so we know that there's salt marsh in these places as well. I didn't put the bird information on here, but when we run the model and spit out the results, we see that these areas with a complex amount of both salt marsh and tidal mudflat, which are important for willets both to breed and to forage, are the places that have the highest counts of willet in purple. And so this is that filling in the gaps. This is that complex set of information about the environment that lets us make these predictions across as much of space and time as possible. All right, so we got our birds, we got our environmental variables. Let's tune that down a little bit. As I said in that kind of opening slide, we want to understand this availability for detection. We do this with weather. We know that weather has a strong impact on birds. And so on the left here, I've got this long list of hourly weather variables. So when you go out, you tell us when and where you're birding. We can actually go to a data product provided by the Copernicus, but the European Union, and gather information about what the weather was like while you were out birding. And we know that the detection of various birds varies with different weather variables. I put one example here on the right, where you're looking at the relationship between wind gusts and wood thrush detection. That x-axis is the speed of the wind gusts, 0 to 10 meters per second, and then higher and lower is how much wood thrush is being detected across that set of variables. Not surprisingly, wood thrush is a species that does not want to sing when it is very windy because its song is not heard well. A well-known acoustic phenomenon with vocalizing birds. Here we're capturing that and accounting for that variation in what people are doing when they're out birding, because sometimes they're out and it's windy and they're not detecting wood thrush, and sometimes they are. And this helps our models better understand where wood thrush really are. Okay, we've got as much information as we've been able to pull in about the environment. Let's start talking about people a little bit. One of the key first factors about people is their ability to detect birds. So we've developed what we call a checklist calibration index. People vary a lot in their ability to detect birds. You can imagine a beginning birder, somebody who's learning to use the technology, or people who are winning awards for how many birds they're seeing. And these people all detect birds in different ways and at different rates. So what we've done is modeled what we call a species accumulation curve. On the x-axis here is the length of a checklist. The y-axis shows the number of species recorded. Each dot is a checklist. We've drawn a line through it to show that curve. This is the rate at which people are accumulating species on a checklist. On the left here, I've got observer A. On the right, I've got another observer, observer C. You can see that that curve is a lot steeper. There's a difference between these two observers. We need to account for that if we're going to understand when observer A is out birding versus when observer C is out birding, and they do or don't detect a certain species. This plays out across groups of observers. Here we're looking at these curves across a whole set of observers in a region. And you can see that there's a lot of spread. There's a lot of noise. Some people are great at accumulating species, others not so much. And this is really great because having all this information across the whole pool lets us use everyone's information. I commonly get asked, well, like, I'm not a very good birder. You don't want my data. And the reality is, no, we do, because it actually helps us understand the range of variation in people's ability to detect birds. And we model it specifically, and then we can take advantage of everyone's information. It's better than not participating. And we can see, if we look at people through time, how their checklist calibration index is changing. We can see learning, right? This observer is detecting more birds through time. The higher on the y-axis, the more birds detected compared to other people. We can also see people senescing, right? As a middle-aged man, I know I get to look forward to my hearing declining over the next 20 years. And that's what this might look like. But it doesn't mean I don't get to participate. It doesn't mean my data is not valuable. We're capturing that. We're accounting for that. And that's really exciting. Because it's important when it comes to the birds. Here is a plot showing the estimated detectability of a black-capped chickadee. This is in the Midwest, and this is looking at the months across the year. That line that's drawn there right now is the estimated detectability for someone with a high CCI, somebody who's very good at accumulating species, right? Whereas somebody who has a lower detection capability, a lower CCI, that detectability drops in the breeding season when the birds are on nests and have chicks and are not singing, are not vocalizing. They're foraging insects instead of going to feeders. And so if we just used that bottom curve, we would miss a lot of signal about this species in trying to model when and where it is. Okay, back to our model. Wow, we're really piling up the data. We've got a lot of different pieces here. So we've got some information about people, especially at a kind of fine scale. The other piece is this effort and site selection that we put into the model. And this, I've kind of lumped two things into one here. But like I said, we really need those checklists to submit information about effort. And this includes information about time at multiple scales, but also, duration, distance, how fast were you traveling? You'd be surprised how many people submit checklists in a car going 60 miles an hour. How many people were out. And so I've made a graph here that shows time of day and how available for detection, or how well detected white-throated sparrow is throughout the day. At dawn, right? No surprise, this is a dawn chorus species that vocalizes readily at dawn. And it just tails off throughout the day because it's no longer singing or it's not actively feeding. It's just kind of quiet in the woods. And so having a handle on this in our eBird checklist, again, lets us account for this and lets the model better learn where white-throated sparrows really are. All right, site selection is that other thing. And so this is basically, site selection is this term for why people are birding where they are, or where they're birding. I like this map. There's only two pieces of information on this map: the location of eBird checklists and the outline of the state of New York. And so, no surprises. Urban areas have a lot of data. People go birding where they are. People also go birding where there are birds. And people don't go birding where they can't get to very well, although some intrepid people do, and that data is very valuable. But we have this kind of bias sample. We say that we have a bias towards urban human environments, and we do. But we can do some things when we do the analysis to try to take care of this and balance this out as best we can. All right, so this is a little less nice map of the Northeast US. Again, each blue dot is a location of a checklist for a week of the year, some random week of the year. I don't know what it is. But again, you see the clustering here around these urban centers. What we do is we throw down a grid on this surface and we sample from it. And by throwing down this grid and sampling, balancing the number of checklists, you can start to see in these gray dots in the background that didn't get selected, that bias starting to fall away more, right? The urban signal is becoming less apparent. We're only grabbing a couple of checklists from these dense urban areas, and we're favoring the checklists from more remote areas when we sample. Our models do this a lot of times, so checklists get used. It doesn't mean that urban area checklists don't get used. But it helps us balance that information out. We can also take this and run it through a model that explains and kind of fills the gaps for site selection. So what you're looking at here is an estimate, a prediction at every 3 kilometer pixel in the Northeast of where people are likely to go birding. Where is that combination of environmental variables likely to be sampled well by people? And on the left is that first plot I showed you, no grid sampling, just the raw eBird data going through. And you can see that the only places with the light values, pink or gray, which indicate a high likelihood of being sampled, really the places that are focused on there are the urban areas. And that's that bias coming through. But on the right, once we've balanced the sample and put that grid down, you can see now that those lighter values spread out more. There's less bias in where we're getting information from. It's not perfect, right? This whole map is not gray, but it does help us deal with that bias, which is really important. Okay, all right, so we got our whole model. This is all the pieces of information we've tried to account for in understanding both the birds, the environment, and the people. But we have one more kind of tricky part to do, and that's scaling. We need to put all this together in a framework where we can basically sample enough times, sample data, and deal with some other issues related to space, scale. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So this is a map of relative abundance for tree swallow in the marsh. And this concept that we're dealing with is stationarity. That's not what I want to do. Okay. Sorry for the mistiming. On the right-hand side in Tennessee, you can see a picture of like an open field forested area. This is a habitat that tree swallows like during this time of year in Tennessee. But in California, they're out over a lot of agricultural fields in the Central Valley. And these are different habitats, but sometimes to the remote sensing, fields are fields, and they look the same. And so if we were to fit a model, right, where we gave it all this information across this much space, it might kind of learn the wrong things. And so what we do to get robustness in our estimates, to get information about uncertainty, is to break it up with what we've developed a spatiotemporal exploratory model. And so I'm going to go through a little simulation of what this spatiotemporal exploratory model does. So imagine a surface in space. Red is more birds, yellow is less birds. We want to try to capture that truth as best as possible. So here's some simulated data, right? This is similar to our eBird data. It's kind of scattered and less and more sparse in the top part of the image, more dense in the bottom part of the image, even though that's not where the information about the true surface really is. So what we do is we divide that information up into space. into different grids. So we're going to break up the whole space into smaller spaces. And then we're going to take these locations in X and we're going to fit one model there, right? And right now it doesn't look like it's doing a very good job. And it's not, because it's just one piece of the puzzle. But we do this for all of these. And again, some of these are doing poorly. Some of these are doing well. Note that the ones at the bottom with lots of data are doing a little better. And then we keep doing this. We divide again, and we fit models again, and we divide again, and we fit models again, and predict. And we're going to then summarize this information across all this dividing, fitting, and predicting. And here's what an average of 3 looks like. It's kind of getting near the true surface, but not really. So let's do it some more. Okay, here's 5 predictions. Better, but still a little rough. 10 predictions is starting to feel pretty good. 100 predictions is about as good as we're going to do, given how sparse the data are in the top part of this. So this is how we break it up. And to transfer this over into the real world, here's an example of what a partition of the whole world looks like. And we do this adaptively based on how much data there is. So you can see that across Africa and across Russia, the grid cells, the grids, these regions that we're fitting models in and predicting are fairly large. But if you look at the United States or Southeastern Australia or India or Northwestern Europe, the model sizes are starting to get smaller because we have enough data to fit models within a smaller region. This particular shape that you're looking at here is derived from Buckminster Fuller's buckyball. I can't remember the exact name of the projection, but it's a way to break up the Earth that preserves both the size of these of these partitions and the shape. And so that's really handy in making sure that our models are being fair across the globe. All right, let's put all this together. Here's an example for indigo bunting, and I'll replay this. What you're looking at is 1 week of estimates coming out of our modeling framework. We're predicting relative abundance here. Dark purple is a high relative abundance. Yellow is a low relative abundance. Each square that you're seeing represents a single model from a single week making that prediction. It's taking all the data in that region, running the model with all that information that we fit about it, and then making a prediction. And so you can start to see patterns evolving here related to rivers, the Mississippi lowlands. You start to see things evolve. But it's not until we do this a bunch of times that we get kind of a nice smooth service, a good estimate, like I showed in the last frame. So the next one is going to take the information at the end of this screen, do it 100 times. And I'll play this again. But each frame is all of the estimates from a single replicate, and we're averaging it 100 times. And by doing this, and there's the final product. Let's do that again. By doing this, we can generate uncertainty estimates, and we can generate model performance statistics. We can, have a sense of how well the model is estimating those locations. It's fun to watch this one because at the beginning, it's kind of noisy and it's trying to figure it out, but then it latches on pretty quick. And then really at the end, when we're doing more folds, it's really trying to fill in the sparse spaces at the edges. That takes more information to figure out where a species is rare. And then this done over all the weeks leads to, these products that people might be familiar with, where we're showing the relative abundance of a species every 3-kilometer pixel at every week of the year, in this case for indigo bunting. So I think this is, kind of an example of how we're doing what we're doing to generate relative abundance. I want to dive in a little bit more to what relative abundance is, because I think people can be confused about it. So I'll give this dry text version of it first, but then I'll walk through a good example of it. So what we're estimating is the count of individuals of a species detected by an eBirder with a high checklist calibration index, CCI, on a 1 hour, 1 kilometer traveling checklist at the optimal time of day. Remember our effort hours information we had during above average weather conditions, right? You don't want to choose extreme weather conditions because then we might get a bias about things like fallout or things that prevent birds from being detected at a random location in a 3-kilometer by 3-kilometer pixel. So that's the definition. What it really looks like is it's based on kind of 2 pieces of information. So I'm going to show you this legend first here. which is then going to be put on a map. But I want to explain the legend first because it's a little bit complicated. The x-axis is the number of robins detected, so this is that count. And the y-axis is the probability of detecting robins. If you go out, how likely are you to see a robin? So let's start with the pink. That would be individual robins detected frequently. And so if we put this on a map, during the breeding season, there are a lot of places in North America where you're likely to detect an individual robin all the time. It's a common species, it's in forested habitats, it's in cities. A lot of this map has a pinkish hue to it because during that time of year, robins are spread out, they're on their breeding territories. And so you're seeing that combination of occurrence, probability of detection, with the count. Okay, so let's try the other side. Teal. Robins are detected more infrequently, but when they are detected, they're in big flocks. So this happens with robin during the non-breeding season, when they come off their breeding territories and they're in feeding flocks during the winter, roosting flocks. And you can see urban signals starting to pop up in dark blue. There's a general teal quality to this map, especially the edges of the range where these flocks maybe aren't as frequent, but they are flocked up. They're not as likely to be individual birds. And so by combining these two pieces of information, the probability of detecting a robin with a count of the robin, we can get a whole picture. And so I'll just let this animation play because you get to see this fun transition from teal to pink when they're spreading out and they are breeding during the breeding season, and they're more diffuse across the landscape. And then in the fall, as they start to come south in migration and aggregate into flocks, the map has more of a dark blue and teal quality to it. So that's our relative abundance estimate. I want to talk a little bit about trends in a similar way. It's a new product. The method for analyzing it is a little bit different, a little bit more complicated. Here's an example for Swainson's thrush. So we're taking that relative abundance information, and now we want to know how it's changing through time. And so what you're seeing here are 27 by 27 kilometer dots, and they're colored by the direction of the trend, red for negative, blue for positive. The darker the red, the stronger the change in the trend. The bigger the dot, the more birds are there during the middle of the time period. So here we're looking at 2007 through 2021 for the breeding season of the species. We're seeing a lot of decline across the southern portion of the range and in the Pacific Northwest, whereas potentially in British Columbia and Alaska, there is some increase. White dots show places where we're uncertain. So if you look at Idaho and Idaho and Montana, white dots mean there may not be much change, or we just don't know what it is. We can't pick up that signal. Part of the reason trends is difficult has to do with that human behavioral element. And we call this confounding because there's a lot of aspects of what people do that cause confounding. So in the first example here, this map is showing yearly checklist density. And you can see how in 2007, the locations with high density of checklists, darker green, are pretty sparse. White means no checklists. But by the end of the time period, 2018, there's a lot of data, right? This is not a structured survey. People are not going to the same places every year. So we have to deal with this. Similarly, people have been changing their start time when they go out surveying. So in red here, is the start of the time period 2004. So yellows, oranges are early. Blues and purples are later in the time series. And each one of these is a density graph showing when people are going out. And you can see that from 2004 through to 2018, people went from going out very early in the morning, -5 means -5 hours before the middle of the day, to going out over a more generalized period of time. And this shift in when people are sampling can have an impact on how you would estimate a trend. And then people are changing how they're going out birding, right? Merlin and Sound ID is transformative for a number of people, and it's adding to their learning. And we need to capture that if we're going to understand how the bird trends are changing through time, because if we don't, it might add a false signal. So I'm not going to go into the depths of the methodology today, but it's similar in a lot of senses to what we do to estimate that relative abundance at a high resolution. We're taking the eBird observations, we're taking the habitat information, we're taking the participant information, we're sending it through what we call a double machine learning. And basically the goal of double machine learning is first to model out all that, as much of that confounding as I talked about, that variation in where people are going through time, when they're going birding, how they're going birding. We want to try to model as much of that out first, and then we want to model the change in birds through time. And so we have a paper in review right now talking about this methodology. We have some confidence that it's working because we are comparing these estimates with independent estimates. In North America, the obvious choice is the North American Breeding Bird Survey. This plot here has 9 panels. On the x-axis are eBird trend estimates within bird conservation regions. Each dot is a bird conservation species trend estimate. On the y-axis are the breeding bird survey, and these are binned by the quality from each surveys. So if you focus on the far bottom right corner, we're looking at estimates of trends from both eBird and the breeding bird survey for what each survey considers to be their highest quality species. And there we have fairly good agreement. An R-squared is 0.47. It's not really high, but it's good. If you start considering overall quality across the different bins, it starts to deteriorate. And that's likely because both surveys are not doing a good job of the estimate. So we have some confidence that it's working in that regard. The other thing that we've done is behind all of this analysis, we put simulations. And so this is an example of what a trend simulation looks like. On the right is a simulated trend. We've taken eBird data and added synthetic trends to it, right? So we've chosen a spatial pattern where we're going to have a negative trend in red and then in dark blue, a positive trend. And so we're going to take this synthetic simulated data and run it through our analysis, our analysis model. And what you see on the left is the model's estimate for that simulated trend. And you can see it's doing a good job of generally recovering those patterns. Maybe doesn't always get the magnitude right. And you can see uncertainty at the edges between the red and the blue. But on the whole, it's doing a good job. And we do this for a whole suite of scenarios. We do it for every species we model. And it gives us some confidence in the quality of our trends estimates based on independent-ish data. All right, talked about relative abundance, talked about trends. Got a few minutes left here. I want to talk about some external validation and some brief talk about applications, and then we can answer some questions. So validation. We've worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on a number of projects related to eagles. Right, here's an estimate for bald eagle from a couple years ago. That fine scale 3-kilometer information. Darker the red, the more bald eagles are around. Paler it is, the less bald eagles are around. We worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service to look at their survey information about nesting territories as a way to validate our estimates. So, can we use eBird status estimates to predict a number of occupied nesting territories for bald eagle? On the right, you'll see the different regions that the Fish and Wildlife Service had survey data for, where they have been surveying occupied nesting territories. And on the left is a correlation plot for the two surveys. On the x-axis on the bottom is our relative abundance, and on the y-axis are the number of nests in each of these regions. Each dot is one of the regions on the right. There's a really tremendous correlation, 0.88. There's a really good agreement between what eBirders are going out and doing and what official Fish and Wildlife Service sampling is seeing. So this is great. When we have that much correlation, we can feel like we can build a model. So we want to predict the entire US, right? These locations on the right did not cover the entire lower 48. So if the Fish and Wildlife Service wants to know what's going on with bald eagles as a whole, we need to try to fill in that space. Another example of filling in the gaps. So we wanted to build a model where we could predict Fish and Wildlife Service aerial surveys. We did it with only 2% accuracy. We could come up with an actual estimate of how many birds were in each of these different flyway service areas. And then that helps the Fish and Wildlife Service monitor. But it gives us good confidence that our abundance estimates are reliable. Okay, in a similar vein, we'll talk about applications. Mostly going to talk about 2 applications related to eagles. Again, we've been working with the Fish and Wildlife Service on eagle management. Part of this is due to the fact that eagles often get killed by wind turbines, unfortunately, and we want to try to reduce that as much as possible. And so we've worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service to use those relative abundance surfaces that you've seen, combine them for golden eagle and bald eagle, and create what are called low exposure maps. And so the purple here area means that a location does not have low exposure to eagles, either bald eagle or golden eagle, whereas the green areas do have lower exposure to bald eagle or golden eagle. And so this is becoming part of Fish and Wildlife Service official policy about permitting wind energy development. And if you're in a purple area, you have to go through a process that's more rigorous in terms of permitting, whereas we can facilitate easier development of wind energy in the locations that are less likely to have incidental take of either eagles. So it's really exciting to have this information go out in the world and help protect eagle populations in the US while encouraging renewable energy development. Similarly, the Fish and Wildlife Service is interested in golden eagle. This is our trends map for the non-breeding season of golden eagle from last year. It's not looking great. There's a lot of red on that map, but there's some interspersed areas of blue. And in the northwestern part of the US, the Fish and Wildlife Service has been doing surveys. And so the goal was to integrate our estimates of trends with these surveys to predict populations in other places or out in time. So what you're looking at here on the x-axis is time, y-axis is a population size estimate for these different regions that the Fish and Wildlife Service is monitoring. The green bars are an integrated trend, and the dots are surveys. What you can see is that there's great agreement between the two. There's a little bias maybe in the Southern Rockies. The integration and the survey alone are not creating different estimates, which means that we can use this information to increase the temporal extent of our analysis. So if the surveys, which are dangerous and expensive, aren't able to run, or something like COVID happens, we can fill in that information with the eBird trends and keep an eye on the golden eagles. Similarly, we can downscale that information about eagles. These are those regions that we were talking about. Each of these regions, they just have one number estimate of how many eagles per square kilometer there are. But with our high resolution relative abundance estimates, we can scale that information and get a much more detailed, fine sense of where these golden eagle populations are within these regions, which is valuable for managing and monitoring golden eagle populations. So I hope those examples are encouraging and enlightening. I just want to talk about the fact that we've got some upcoming workshops. A lot of the questions from folks ahead of time were really interested in how they could work with either raw eBird data or with the status and trends products for various applications. We just submitted 2 proposals for workshops at the Ornithological Congress of the Americas, which is in Brazil in August. So please come join that. There is limited capacity there just due to space. We expect those workshops to be approved and open for participation. And then this whole talk has been a little bit of a precursor to having workshops later this year in August or September. One about working with raw eBird data, access, preparation, processing, how to get to modeling or whatever you want to do with it. And then the second one is analyzing eBird status and trends data products, taking those estimates that, at the beginning I showed where you could download them and do different things with them, different conservation applications. So if you're here and you're interested, please send an email to support@birdsoftheworld.org and tell us what you want to learn. We can tailor that online workshop. We can tailor what we present at the Ornithological Congress of the Americas to be the most useful. I see a quick note that are the workshops free? The online one, yes, will definitely be free. Laura, yell at me if I'm wrong. The one at Ornithological Congress of the Americas, I believe, has a small fee. I think it's less than 50 US dollars, but online free, please. So I hope to see folks there. And at the very end, I will make a plug that we are looking for a postdoc with experience, somebody with a PhD in data science, machine learning, causal inference, deep learning, any of these really strong computational skills. Please email Daniel Fink, df36@cornell.edu, or check out this link. It's not a postdoc ad, that's my fault potentially. The link is the preprint to our trends methodology paper. It gives you a flavor of what we're working on. And if you see something in there that's interesting to you, maybe reach out to us and we'll get you on a postdoc application track. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at mta45@cornell.edu. Questions to eBird@cornell.edu also will make it to me. And as we wrap, I'd just like to thank all of our sponsors here at the bottom who make this work possible. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. It's fascinating. Absolutely. Any workshop that we do would be an online virtual workshop, completely free. So the way we look at it is we're here to serve the scientific community with our content. And if these webinars are helpful to just get you deeper into your science, that's what we're all about. So I look forward to developing that with you. And when you send the emails to us, we'll be passing them on to Tom, and they'll design an awesome workshop. That'll be fun as well as informative. So yeah, a lot of questions. It's great to see the status and trends work being used at the decision maker level with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So thanks for presenting that. A lot of opportunities around the world for that to happen. A couple questions about what software you use for this, and I'm curious about how long it takes to run a single species.
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of our workflow uses the R statistical language. And the primary reason for that is the ecological community has a lot of packages developed specifically for doing the types of modeling that we're doing. Same with the machine learning community. It's really easy for us to develop new features and exchange information with other researchers and scientists because of that language. We do have some Python wrapped around all of that to help run our workflow. Sean Lagaki, who's our data engineer, is a wizard at that. At the bottom right here, you'll see a couple of different computing frameworks. We collaborate closely with the Cornell Institute for Computational Sustainability to do research. Access is an NSF-funded supercomputing network that has replaced Exceed. And we do a lot of our computing at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center. So there's a lot of software that's used to run these models. It does take a lot of computing to run these models. As you can imagine, when I was talking about breaking up space and time into lots of little pieces, doing that hundreds of times costs compute cycles. And so we're really grateful to the Access Network and to the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center for the computation we have there. It takes, it's sometimes hard to relate, but it's about 3,000 CPU hours per species. Which if you did it on one core on your machine takes, I believe, 300 years. So the fact that we can parallelize this on supercomputers makes it possible, which is really exciting.
Yeah, that's really just amazing. Okay, so you and I can tackle the Q&A together. And if there's any question that you would like to handle first, go ahead, but maybe I'll start here. Tim O'Connell is asking, are there any geographic or deal field filters that go into calculation of CCI? For example, a lot of my checklists are dog walk biased, in which I'm out at times during the day, especially mid-afternoon, that I wouldn't choose to do if my goal was to maximize species richness on a checklist. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, hello, Tim. Nice to hear from you. So we don't really have, I guess there is some geographic information baked into it. Basically, when we calculate CCI, we're using richness as the response variable, how many species you're seeing. And we're using all of that remote sensing information in the same model. So it's another machine learning model. And so it's accounting for, if you went to a park near your house, versus you went to a hotspot. It's accounting for that. So it's not, if you're walking your dog in the afternoon, we also have the information about time of day. We also have the information about weather in there. That model is going to say, oh, Tim was out walking his dog in the middle of the afternoon in a place with a lot of nighttime lights. We don't expect him to see a lot of birds. So it's not going to, create a checklist calibration index that would it would basically the index would expect that you wouldn't see many birds. And so it wouldn't negatively affect, it wouldn't downweight you in the final model, so to speak. Trying to come up with the right terms there. But yes, basically all that's in there so that when you go out is accounted for, and it's not having a negative effect on that score.
Great. So Alexis Diaz is asking, how do you deal with the accuracy of locations on records? For example, INAT databases offer data on accuracy of location that might also contribute with bias on the analyses. People may only provide an approximate location, or location introduced might depend on the precision of their incorporated GPS on electronic devices.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely a part there that I didn't go to a lot of detail, and that's related to the tracks that the eBird app collects. I mean, if I can tell anybody who wants their data to be more meaningful for science, is to use the tracks feature on the mobile app, because it gives us precise GPS location. I will say we are not leveraging it as fully as we could be, partly because, I think about 50% of the data we use has tracks, so we're still waiting for more adoption. We do take the center of a track as the spatial information. So if you're reporting I was at a hotspot, we will still take the information from the track that says what part of the hotspot you went to. So we get more precision there. Similarly, we also build a better estimate of where people are birding at hotspots by looking at all the tracks associated with the hotspot and getting a better location there. But there is a ton of research and potential that could be done to use that specific track level information in terms of understanding the landscape that people were in. And I think in the next few years, that's something we're going to start to look at.
Excellent. Is there any document explaining how CCI is calculated?
Yes, it'll take me a little while to dig up a paper, but there's a paper by Alison Johnston, actually a couple papers, but there's a paper by Alison Johnston describing the method there. We're also doing some improvements to it and expect to publish a paper on that, but we could send that out later.
Great. Yeah, when we send out the recording, we'll put some links to it at the bottom of that email. All righty. So bird atlases are grid-based and spread out sampling effort according to that grid. How does this interact with this S&T modeling?
Well, I will say that grid sampling from atlases is very valuable. We'll say specifically atlases that are run through eBird are very valuable in that regard, because we can tag the data as being part of one of these atlases so that we know that if there was an effort for people to go out and sample that grid, that change in people choosing where they're going birding is captured in our trends models. So that's really valuable. I often get a question from partners like, what can we do to have trends in 5 years? My answer right now is set up an eBird atlas, choose a stratified subset, a portion of those that are spread out, get to those every year, try to fill in as many as you can. Because we've seen with a number of breeding bird atlases in the US that have been run through eBird, the coverage is amazing, like in Wisconsin, and I think that some of our best quality data. So
great. Can eBird be used to estimate the abundance of rare species in an area? And also maybe lead into how do we approach seabird analysis as well? So rare birds and seabirds.
Yeah, so rare birds is definitely one of the tough things if we're talking about populations that are less than 1,000 individuals. It's likely that structured monitoring is a better tool for understanding those populations, especially since a lot of really rare species birders can't access or shouldn't access. But it's not that it can't be done. We have a number of threatened species models in our, things like spotted owl, whooping crane, black rail. So we do pick up signal when birders find them. It's very hard to estimate trends for those species. We can pull off some information for status. Really range restricted species, things in South America that maybe only have a couple dozen square kilometer range. Those are also going to be really challenging. Definitely the strong suit of eBird is those 6,000, 7,000 most common species in the world, and being able to monitor those in a way that nobody else can.
Mm-hmm. What is eBird's priority for data collection at this point? To try to fill in some of those gaps in terms of observational data?
Yep. This is something that we are starting to kind of work on and better develop. We haven't been able to provide people with like a number to go, fill out and get a certain amount of data. We're doing some research on this. We have a general sense of how much data. The priority right now is just to get as much data as we possibly can, because two things are equally valuable. One is exploring new places and going and filling in gaps with checklists. But the other is repeated visiting, going to a similar location every year, right? You can imagine how that can contribute to trends. And so both of those are valuable. So there's a lot of goals related to just increasing the general amount of data, also increasing the checklists that are eligible for status and trends modeling, right? We want people to use those best practices and get used to doing that, using the app, using tracks, practicing counting, those sorts of things. But I think you can expect in the next few years to see some changes to how we're suggesting, if people have spare time to go do those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. And best practices for eBird can be found in the help section of the eBird, right?
Yeah, there is a best practices for how to use eBird there, and also in the status and trends FAQ, there's a list of the parameters that I showed earlier for what data is included in status and trends. I also saw somebody asked a question in the chat about important publications that contain the methodology. If you go to the FAQ, there is a references section to the FAQ in eBird status and trends that lists most of the publications that this work is based on. So that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'll let you choose the next one.
Okay. One that I didn't respond to was pelagic species. We actually have, I think there's 3, and I'm trying to remember them all off the top of my head. Last year, we actually modeled some open water species for the first time. Brandt's cormorant, northern gannet, and maybe black-vented shearwater. Those 3 species we did actually model over open water. We don't have a ton of environmental covariates over open water yet right now. We have bathymetry and we have weather, and that's about it. So they're kind of rough, smooth models, but I was really excited with how well northern gannet performed. As soon as we have the capacity to bring in information about sea surface temperature, salinity, chlorophyll, those will make our open water modeling better. However, we definitely are limited, much more limited in terms of data over open water than we are on land for obvious reasons. The North Atlantic is maybe the only place, that or the West Coast of the US are the only places we can really do that well right now. There's going to have to be some creative thinking about how we, incorporate different data sources over water about seabirds to do these sorts of estimates. There are some that are pretty strongly coastal. I think that we have in a few of the Mediterranean shearwaters that are well seen from shore. But it's definitely challenging, and we're working often with different agencies to pull in seabird surveys that governments are doing sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. Some species have a very short estimated breeding periods and very long pre and post migration periods. Is this accurate? If not, what causes this to happen?
Yeah, so the first thing that immediately comes to mind when that question gets asked is that shorebirds are moving constantly almost. So a lot of these long distance Arctic breeding shorebirds, things like black-bellied plover or semi-palmated sandpiper, have a really long protracted migrations from South America or Central America to the Arctic. By the time they get there, many of them will have already have failed at breeding and immediately turn around and come back. A lot of younger birds will stay on the wintering grounds and not make it to the breeding territory. And so, those seasonal maps need to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt, because what we're trying to do there is capture a stationary of a period for breeding and non-breeding as we can. They're not where birds are breeding, it's where birds are during the breeding season. And so that's why some of those windows, especially for shorebirds, are very short.
Mhm. Okay.
Wow, I got to be honest, I'm like overwhelmed with how many questions people are asking.
They're all so good.
It's really great.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start at the bottom because there's a lot of great questions. Is eBird interested in small island endemic species? Yes, we are. If you look through the Parulidae, we have attempted to run all of the New World warblers, the Parulidae, and you'll see a number of the Caribbean ones there. We even estimate a model for Barbuda warbler. A number of the other ones that are, I can't remember, all the islands are on, like St. Lucia, things like that. Our goal is eventually to, model as many species as we possibly can. I would hope that in 10 years we can make it to 6,000 or 7,000 species modeled. So yes, definitely are interested in those.
Great.
Somebody did ask, oh gosh, I've already lost track of it because the questions keep coming. Somebody asked, do you perform CCI for European countries as well? Yes, everything we do is completely global except for the Antarctic. There isn't much remote sensing data about Antarctica. Fortunately, there aren't too many species of birds there. So we're not in a phase where we're highly concerned with Antarctica. Everything else we do is as global as possible. So we're trying to understand the behavior of birders across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Above that, somebody asked, which machine learning algorithms are you using for your models? You want to get into the nitty gritty. We use random forest for the relative abundance estimations. We're using the R Ranger package, which is a really simple and fast algorithm for doing that. For the trends models, which if you read this preprint that I've got up here, it's again multiple random forests, uses the R package GRF, but those are tied together. So we're also doing research, active research right now into moving to a deep learning framework. And I can't even answer what the specific deep learning framework would be at this point. But that's coming in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Anything pop up?
Yeah.
Oh, here's one. Do you already have models which include future predictions of bird species abundances distributions on the basis of different climate change scenarios, especially the already threatened ones? I will be honest that the climate change question is difficult. It's a very common practice for people to take the climate change scenarios and put those into models and forecast into the future. The problem with that is that the climate variables, there's a lag between what's happening with climate and what's happening on the landscape, whether the habitat will actually be there or not. And so you could falsely create a wrong picture by forecasting that into the future and saying, look at all this climate that's great for this bird, or there isn't this climate left for the bird anymore. But the relationship through habitat isn't there. And so it's difficult. It's again another topic that we want to do with research, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask a question. Since there's been many people who are interested in the application of different flyways. So this person asks, is there any possibility to participate in the modeling of bird abundances and distribution over the year on other flyways? Or are you taking a flyway approach to this? Anything you'd like to say about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are, again, as we try to do everything as globally as possible. There are a couple exceptions to that. We release some trend models that are regionally restricted outside of the Western Hemisphere. We've been trying our best in the East Asian, Australasian flyway to model species. Some shorebirds perform very well there. There are a lot of islands that don't have data in that flyway that are challenging. And so they may not pass quality review and they may not make it on the website. Further engagement with partners in that part of the world will get us the data we need to make those models. But again, we're modeling each species as globally as we can. And if we just don't have the data, the species doesn't make it. So
Great. I
got one here about checklists that qualify from prior years. I think maybe one thing I didn't make clear is that we're using a window of data from the past 15 years. This year, the estimate is for 2021. We're predicting data we're using eBird checklists from 2007 through 2021. And to create kind of a realish time snapshot of what's happening with birds, we can't go too far back, right? Bird distributions are changing. And so for this particular use case, checklists prior to 2006 are not getting used. It doesn't mean other people can't use them. Older, high quality data is extremely valuable. There are people that want to analyze trends over longer time periods. So don't want to discourage anybody from submitting older eBird data.
Here's one. The status map for Eurasian coot shows that they are estimated as present in very low abundance across most of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Oman. Can you talk about why the model would be predicting that they would be across these regions when actual observations are restricted to the coast?
Yeah, so we do our best with our modeling methods to control extrapolation as well as we possibly can. And it's a trade-off, because if we control it really tightly, we're going to throw out good estimates from a large portion of the range just to prevent some extrapolation. And there are parts of the world, where this person notes, like the interior of the Arabian Peninsula, where there's very little data, and we are doing some extrapolation. There are a number of broad Eurasian species that do extrapolate across the peninsula, but we think it's worth the trade-off for how much high quality data there is everywhere else. And people who want to dig into the results, our package has information about quality across space and time. It's a little harder to dig into. It's another feature that we want to add in the coming years is more easy to access information about quality. The other thing I would say is that there likely are water features across the peninsula that have the coot in it, but that maybe the information we have about the landscape isn't capturing well. And when you combine that with sparse data, the model kind of makes not a very good prediction.
Do you use complete checklists longer than 3 hours?
We do. We use complete checklists up to 24 hours right now, as long as they're not traveling longer than 10 kilometers. It's not it's not ideal. We would prefer people to keep them under 6 hours, as that's where most of the data is.
Great. I don't think you answered this yet. Wondering when we can anticipate trends products that they will be available as rasters.
Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you for that. So our paper is having its revisions reviewed right now. As soon as that paper is published, we are going to release the data behind the trends. We really felt it was important to have a peer-reviewed publication associated with the release of the data. So it's all ready. We will make it public as soon as that paper is accepted. We're really hoping, actually, by the time we have this workshop in the fall, that data is available.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, somebody brought up the issue of the black skimmer. Let's see. I lost it.
Oh, yes. I saw that one, the trend model. Let me just go ahead and jump over to the website real quick, because one thing I want to point out about that is, and I'll share my screen in a second here. Share. Okay, black skimmer trends. Share. Not a lot of black skimmers in California compared to the Gulf Coast. And so I think what folks are talking about here, as there are birds, population in the recent years have been growing in the southern part of the Bay Area. Again, the scale of our analysis is a little bit coarse for that level of resolution. We have 2 dots in the area. One is showing a very strong trend. Again, this is over the period of 2007 through 2015. But this other dot here at the very south end of the bay is white, and it's actually showing that we don't know what the trend is there, and it may be an increase. It may be the bird has increased 9% there over that time period. So it could capture that recent increase in skimmers within the region. But again, these trends analyses do use a lot of regional information in their estimate, and so if the population as a whole is declining within the region, some of that will be in each of these individual pixels as well.
Sounds good. Great. So for others, this is from Praveen from India. Hello, Praveen. For others who are modeling using eBird data, can the tracks be accessible? They are not available in EBD right now.
Right. Unfortunately, because of privacy reasons, we don't feel comfortable releasing the track information right now. I would say for partners, hi Praveen, that we could figure something out. At the very least, I think we could make the track level centroid available. Yeah, reach out, we can have that discussion.
Okay, sounds good. Of course, Praveen is with Bird Count India. Let's see. Do status and trends models use checklists that qualify from prior years? Or did you answer that one?
I think we answered that one, yeah.
It didn't go away yet.
Let's see here.
We could be here a long time, Tom.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
So at the top, Orlando. Hello, Orlando. We've met at NAOC. If you're still there, there is a link in the FAQ of the data sets, a specific link of data sets used to download the NASA environmental variables. That I don't have great information about. We kind of do that ourselves. But if you come to the workshops, either at OCA or this fall, we'll have a section about how to get environmental data. It's definitely one of the challenging things in teaching the raw eBird data because it's this other big step of computing. Let's see here. Somebody asked how species-specific detectability is incorporated in the abundance models. Unlike occupancy models, we're not trying to get to perfect detection. We're not trying to estimate occupancy. It's basically encounter rate is the part that we're incorporating. So we're using the presence absence checklists in our random forest model. The model is seeing, positive observations, detections, and zeros or non-detections, and coming up with an estimate of how frequently the species is encountered.
Here's a question. So eBird offers you the ability to put age and sex into your observation. I wonder how many people are using that now, what percent, if just a guess. And does this now, or will it ever fit into the data that you are looking at?
Yeah, so I don't have a specific number. I do know we've looked at age and sex information in eBird, and I do know it's pretty rarely reported. It's not a commonly used field. I want to say sub double digits of checklists have that information on it.
We need more, everyone.
Yeah, it's useful. It's useful, valuable information. I would say, especially when it comes to photos and work that Macaulay Library is doing related to Merlin Photo ID. Having that information is valuable. I know there's lots of researchers that want to have that information, in the eBird database in general. I don't foresee that as a priority in terms of status and trends in the years to come, partly because of how little of it there is, and just not on the list of trying to get to monitoring the world's birds right now.
Yeah, great. All right, so I would say we wrap up maybe in 3 minutes or so.
Okay, I see one great question here at the end. Are the short complete checklists valuable when you get out for less than 10 minutes and filling the whole picture you've seen here? What would you suggest to create short complete ones? Yes, absolutely. Short complete checklist, please. You know, the breeding bird survey protocol in the United States is a 3-minute stationary count. And so you can detect, you know, certainly in high biodiversity areas. I know when I was in Ecuador, I would struggle to get everything in 10 minutes. But you can get a lot of information in 10 minutes, and that's super valuable. Somebody asked, if we don't have relative abundance estimates for my species of interest, what do you suggest? Fit your own model? Are there public data layers? Any product designed for poor species, data poor species? So no, we don't have great information for data poor species. I will say, if species you're interested in aren't being modeled, shoot us an email. We put that list together. We do focus on the most prevalent, most common species next. Yours might be on that list. Otherwise, I would say come to the workshop in the later this year, and we can get you on the track to trying to fit your own models. If it is a really locally range restricted species, your own local model might be better than ours. Oh, there's a great question at the end that I get frequently. How will repeatedly observing birds submitting checklists in the same location affect the abundance of the maps? And I think a lot of people think that we're kind of summing up, totaling all the birds at a location. If vagrants are found and everybody goes and sees it, that it'll, make the model think there's a ton of a bird there. Almost everything we do is a form of averaging. We're sampling, we're averaging. The models are estimating, a median response. So repeat sampling at the same location is fine. Multiple people at the same location, although you should use shared checklist if you're in the same group. But there's no problems with that in how we analyze the data.
Mm-hmm. Somebody asked if these will be used in Birds of the World, Merlin, and in eBird profiles. And yes, they are in Birds of the World. We have over 900 in Birds of the World at this point. But like you said, we have higher data standards for anything we pull into Birds of the World, right?
Yeah. So one comment there is that all of these products that we generate are reviewed by experts at the end, and each season is given a quality score from 0 to 3. For Birds of the World, we only release things that have a score of 3 for all seasons, all weeks, are just our highest quality products. On the Status and Trends websites, you can see those that have lower scores. And so, yeah, we're thinking about rolling them out in more places. But for right now, yeah, Birds of the World, Status and Trends website. But don't be surprised if they pop up in some other places in the near future.
Great. And there's 1,800 right now, or 1,200?
So there, in Birds of the World, I think it's close to 900 species from Status and Trends. Yeah. And then we have 20, I think around 2,300 species.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right. So you can find those other ones on eBird.
Status and Trends, yep.
Okay. Great. Somebody asked to share the link of the data set used to download the NASA environmental variables. Obviously, we don't have it handy right now, but any advice on how she could, or he, Orlando, can find that?
I think I answered that one a little bit. There's an FAQ with the links of our.
Perfect. Okay.
Let's see. Would you be fine giving an example of a species got a low enough score this time that was removed? I think if you go to Aleutian Tern on Status and Trends, multiple seasons will be missing. Same with phalaropes, Arctic Tern, Jaegers, they'll be a missing season, partly because they're pelagic. Trying to think of what other, there's a number of species. I think in South America, we struggle with gorgeted sun angel because people are only reporting it from a handful of like famous feeders. That's a problem, in certain parts of the world where majority of the data is coming from tourists and people who are listing birds intensely and going to the same spot just to get it. I'm super guilty of this. I went to Ecuador last year and I only went to famous spots because it was my first trip there. We can struggle to model species because the information is only coming from a few locations.
Mm-hmm. Great point. So spread your birding around. That's one of the keys.
Oh, somebody had a question here about eruptive species. It's interesting. There's one species I would check out in terms of eruption, mountain chickadee. We actually capture it kind of spilling out onto the plains during the winter nicely. It's still a little bit tricky. Our trends, we've done some experiments with trends and we've actually can pick up on that interannual variation when they're moving around. It's a little bit hard to display and it's hard to capture in our high resolution relative abundance estimates, which are, we're trying to do it for 1 year. So it might shift across versions. But that's a product I would keep an eye out for in the next few years, is kind of like a coarser resolution year by year estimate of relative abundance.
Okay, great. Let's do one more question and then we'll wrap up.
Great. There's a really good question. Are there plans of incorporating relative abundance estimate to determine species filters in eBird, thereby dispersing the need of human reviewers? Yes, we would love to do this. I think the first pass would probably be to set like a high count filter. It gets a little tricky when you start talking about rare range edges for species. Because there's also filters have elements of identification related to them, or knowing an observer pool and whether somebody has the experience to identify a certain species. But yes, it's been a dream for a while. We have to put some effort into building capacity within eBird to handle data quality in a little more automated way, but it's something I'm excited to do.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Well, clearly there's a ton of interest in what you're doing. I'm just so glad that everyone joined us today and excited about what you're doing and how some of these tools can be applied. So greater learning opportunities is a big message from this webinar. And maybe you could just go over again what we're planning and learning opportunities for the audience.
Yeah, so I'll just tick back here to our upcoming workshops. This has been super exciting. It's been so awesome to see so many people's questions. I'm really excited. I'm going down to Chile in a couple of weeks for Global Big Day, working with our partners ROC there to see how we can help them use eBird status and trends or develop similar things to status and trends. So if you're one of our partners and you have similar questions, reach out. We want to talk about this stuff. We have resources on that eBird.org science.ebird.org pages in terms of accessing raw eBird data and working with status and trends. We'll have these workshops coming up. You can also shoot an email to eBird at cornell.edu if you have analysis questions, and might take a week or two, but somebody can get back to you there. I'm on Twitter, Tom_Auer. You can ping me there. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. And so again, if you have other specific questions for the Birds of the World workshop, where Tom is going to come in and perhaps somebody from his team to get a little bit more detailed with this information, you can write us support@birdsoftheworld.org, but put eBird workshop in the subject line so we can track it better. We'll be sharing that with Tom, and the design will go from there. So thank you, everybody. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. I don't think so. No, I think that's it. Great. Okay. So yeah, this concludes our full season, our first full season of webinars for the year. So thank you all for joining us at the webinars that we did for the last year. And next year, I think it's going to be starting in September. So we'll have another new set. So stay tuned for that. If you're not already a subscriber, all subscribers will get notified. If you aren't already a subscriber or user of the resource, be sure to sign up on the homepage. There's a get updates field where you can enter your email, and we'll keep you updated through that. So if you would like to give us feedback on today's webinar, reach out to us on the feedback form. Jessica's going to put that in the chat. But I thank you, Tom. I think you went away already, but thank you so much, Tom. So excited about what has been developed. I'm so excited to share it with everyone today. So everyone have a wonderful day as we slide into the weekend. Thanks. Bye-bye.